Trigger warning. This video contains references to themes of suicide and depression, which some individuals may find distressing.
Some of our work we've done in the remote Pacific, there are still pockets of people living in those traditional ways who are still in great shape. Mental health's good, physical health's great. The end of their life is that they're working in a productive person in society right up till the end, and then they just get a little bit sick in the last week or so of their life and they might die, and that's, I guess, of no particular reason other than being old, and that in medicine's called an idiopathic death, and it's the exact opposite of what happens in this country, and especially the Pacific people in this country, is that we can expect a decade or two of disability from poor health in those last years of our lives. So something's changed.
Kia ora na katoa, and welcome to Let's Get Pre-Sifik, a podcast focused on providing concepts and tools for the kete, or basket of knowledge, in dealing with suicide prevention through a Pacific lens. My name is Wiriamu, or Will, and I'll be guiding us through open, honest, and sometimes confronting talanoa about improving our mental health. Grant Schofield is the director of the Centre of Human Potential at AUT and former chief scientific advisor to the Ministry of Education. His research and teaching interests are based in public health, especially the prevention and treatment of chronic disease. He promotes positive health and well-being through lifestyle changes and behaviours, not just on a personal level, but on a public level too. He is the author of 4 best-selling books, including the smash hit What the Fat.
I studied psychology and physiology. This is sort of the biology of humans, and the psychology of humans has always been what I've interested in. Then I moved to Australia and I was a registered psychologist. I think I'm more a problem solver. I want to instantly jump to the answer, which is not how you do psychology counselling, right? You listen to people, you work with them, you dance with them. Where I was trying to find the solutions. I'm a good academic, I think. For a couple of years I was the chief science advisor to the Ministry of Education around health. I was terrible at it because I had to just do what the government said, and so I wasn't really giving advice. I was disseminating their policy, and I always thought some of it was wrong, or at least half of it was always wrong. So I was terrible at that. So I'm more that sort of challenger type personality. So I've written 6 books now on various things from well-being through to diet, a lot on diet. And at the moment I'm also the chief science officer for a company called Pre-Cure, Prevention is Cure, which is really trying to change the way that we think about medicine. What's the future of health look like? And I think we've got ourselves into a real fix in health at the moment. It's not really health, it's fixing up sickness. And that system's really good. If you break your leg, you really want to go and get that fixed up. We're good at it. But if you've got mental health issues, or you're not doing so well, or your weight's got out of control, you've got diabetes, we're really bad at that. And these are problems that we can do better with, and we must.
From an ancestral point of view, my peoples, or the Pacific people, they thrived. They went around the earth before most people did. They had traditional ways of understanding nature and the links between the mind and body. And I guess for some reason, we came over here and there's a different setup, and now we're not thriving. I hope, Grant, that some of the research you do will allow us to, understand ourselves better, maybe.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that exact thing for most of my life, actually. And not just from my work. There was a dentist, actually, in the 1930s called Weston A. Price, who was lamenting that in the US their dental health had gone bad. And he's going, well, I'm not going to study it in the US because we've already screwed that up. I'm just going to go to places where people are healthy, especially with their dental health. And he travelled around 40 countries, and he got to the Pacific, and you can still go and read his journals online. And he's remarking at the most perfect physical specimens in the world of anyone he's seen throughout the Pacific, and then including Maori, living traditionally still in New Zealand at that point. And no one is going to say that's the case 90 years on from when Weston A. Price did that. So a lot's changed. And, well, you go, what? Well, actually, in some of our work we've done in the remote Pacific, there are still pockets of people living in those traditional ways who are still in great shape. Mental health's good, physical health's great. The end of their life is that they're working in a productive person in society right up till the end. And then they just get a little bit sick in the last week or so of their life and they might die. And that's, I guess, of no particular reason other than being old. And that in medicine's called an idiopathic death. And it's the exact opposite of what happens in this country, and especially the Pacific people in this country, is that we can expect, a decade or two of disability from poor health in those last years of our lives. So something's changed. And I think, one way of thinking about it is that there's just a massive mismatch. And so this is this evolutionary biology idea that there's a massive mismatch between the sort of environments that we have lived in and what we live in now. Modern New Zealand, especially the cities, resembles nothing like a traditional Pacific lifestyle. And it's so far removed from it. And I think that affects Pacific people pretty negatively. And can we get closer to that? Well, we're not going to go back to living in those village situations, but we can recreate aspects of that. And I think we're going to have to do that if we want to have a healthy society.
Do you think in our society that people actually think stress is one of the kind of precursors to negative thoughts, hopelessness, things that lead towards actually what we're here to try and combat, which is the suicide?
So stress is such an interesting word because, at one level in biology, like stress is like the most important thing that can happen to you. And we understand if you want to get fitter, you've got to put your body through some stress so it can rebuild itself into a better version of itself. We understand that. The same is true with psychological strain. If you're not having any strain, then you're going to have no resilience to any strain. But what we've ended up with is not that sort of stress at all, not periods of intense hardness and then time to recover and improve from it. We ended up with chronic stress, which is constantly being stressed out. And I think for Pacific people, the number one thing then is money. And the chronic stress of not being able to afford stuff, having to work more jobs, not being in control of that job necessarily because you're always working for someone else. You're not always in control of where your resources go, and then you're left with less than what you need. Those are chronic stresses that you don't adapt to and cause all sorts of harm. So we sort of use stress as a blanket term, but what we actually want to mean is chronic stress that I can't control. Whereas the other stress is like, in my opinion, we should be seeking out more of that, and we don't do enough of that.
What would be some examples of that, Grant? Like just let's take an everyday person and they're having chronic stress. Is that things like constantly worrying?
Yeah, can't pay your bills. Yes, relatives got cancer, you don't know how to afford the treatment. You've got someone in your family with mental illness that they've got no solutions to. Those are all chronic stress. The car's broken down, you have no way of fixing it. Can't pay the electricity bill, can't put the heater on and it's cold. Those are stresses that don't have any beneficial effect. They're just stress.
That's going to lead to a bad outcome. These are things that cause a mental health crisis, right?
Yeah. If you've got chronic stress, then you have no way of improving your biology. You can't be a better human. You're just getting more and more run down, more and more tired, a worse version of yourself biologically. Whereas if you've got time and resources to go to the gym, get a bit fitter, go for a walk in nature, have healthy food, work hard, but then have a holiday and rest, then you're exactly exposing yourself to the stuff that allows your body and your brain to be better and better and better. And there's no limit to that better. You can just be a better and better version of yourself. And so when some stress comes that's not controllable, you're much more able to deal with that. And so there's an argument that, in fact, we're less robust versions of humans than we used to be. And actually it's changed really quickly, right? So we talked about people in the 1930s with Western Price as being perfect specimens. But even in the last 20 years, we measure distress. So just being highly stressed out. This isn't mental illness, just being stressed out. And 1 of 5 of us is like that at any one time. Maori Pacific more than others. And that doubled in the 10 years before that, and it doubled again. So it used to be at 5% at 2000 and the turn of the century. Then at 2010, it was 10%, and now at 2020, it's 20%. So, there's a couple of explanations there. One is the sort of stresses we're getting are worse, and there's some evidence for that. But that's not the whole picture. We're just less good at coping with the same stuff as well. Yeah. Why is that? Because our diet's worse, we exercise less, our sleep's worse, we have less ability to build up and be stronger. And again, it's not a very palatable message because it's like you're not saying, you wouldn't have this mental health problem if you just did that stuff.
I'm not surprised that my people lead all the wrong stats when we frame it up this way.
Yeah,
that is not an environment which you can thrive.
No, as a country with resources, the fact that we let that happen and keep letting that happening without any more resources is a disgrace. And we need to resource that in a way that's fair and gives everyone a fair go. And we're just not doing that. And the health system needs to fundamentally change. I guess we'll get onto that. Government is, in my opinion, I'll probably get told off or cancelled for this, but it's an absolute cesspit of bullying, one-upmanship and all that sort of stuff. And there's been recent stuff coming out in the government where they're going, oh, there was bullying. It's like anyone who's been anywhere near Wellington and the Beehive, it's endemic. And so it's not about the best outcomes for people. It's about politicians and politics. And there's a couple of places in society you can behave like a complete dick and it seems to be all right. One is in politics. They go, oh, yeah, but it's politics. Well, no, you can't be an indecent human being just because it's called politics. Yeah. And the other, surprisingly, is in surfing. Anyone's gone surfing. Like, people can be really aggressive and mean and horrible and violent, and you wouldn't do things that you can't do on land. You can't do that in the supermarket. You'd be arrested. Yeah. So, I don't know.
That's interesting. Yeah. I do want to move to kind of prevention, the talk around how do we get ahead of this, the negative outcome of someone attempting suicide. What leads people? I think the
word that comes into my mind and lights is hopelessness. And there's sort of an idea, they're not loved, they're not this. I don't think there's evidence for that at all. People are loved, they know that they are loved. But I think they believe that they're in a hopeless situation and they're a burden and that the world would be better off if they weren't there. Now, of course, that's actually inaccurate thinking. Those are thinking traps. Nonetheless, that's real for those people, right? So, hopelessness, the world's going to be better off if I didn't burden all these other people that I love as well. So there's already two-way love. They know that. So that's not a thing that's absent.
Hopelessness leads to these further negative thoughts, which just compounds into no way out type scenario.
And suicide's really bad, obviously, especially an attempt is bad. Someone who actually goes through with it, obviously it's really bad for them, but the ripple through the community is never unfelt. But I think it's also worth acknowledging that for every one of those that happens, there's hundreds of thousands of people who are feeling hopeless and hopelessness on that scale that are still doing poorly. And when I talk about health span, they're not living their best life or anywhere near it. And so suicide and suicide prevention is important, but the iceberg under that tip is critical as well, right?
Yeah. There's this monster that lurks, right? And it's waiting for you in your darkest moments. Yeah. Do we even have a system that can help? Because I know you've told me that there's not even enough registered psychologists to deal with everybody that would need to see someone.
There's always monsters lurking. They're negative thoughts. And just remember, as a human, everyone has negative thoughts. You cannot delete thoughts. It's not a possible thing to delete positive thoughts. You think about the best thing that's happened to you. You take some time to do that and then try and wipe it from your memory. It's not going to happen. You go, don't think of an orange. Pop into your mind, right? So you can't delete thoughts. They exist. And negative thoughts, we're hardwired to have negative thoughts. There's monsters lurking because they've saved our lives. And the more you fight with them, not only do they not disappear, they grow in energy. One thing we've tried to do in the medical system is be pretty reductionist about solutions. And it's worked, right? So you go back to Louis Pasteur discovering bacteria and going, look, some of these are really dangerous and we can kill them with antibiotics and save millions of lives. It's choice. It's awesome. That sort of germ theory that Pasteur developed is a good idea. But it's worth acknowledging at the same time as Pasteur was discovering that, there was a contemporary called Antoine Beauchamp, another Frenchman, who was like, hey, Louis, it's good that there's bacteria. It's good you know how to kill them. But you should also acknowledge that when we look across different humans or different animals and we give them the exact same bad bacteria, some of them die and succumb and some nothing happens to them, and some of them actually even thrive from exposure to it. So maybe it's the health and the terrain of the organism. And so there was this sort of two theories: terrain theory, have a healthy body for it to be good, and the germ theory. And arguably, modern medicine has followed germ theory to its bitter end, and mental health is the worst possible example of this. It's like you've got something wrong with the way you're behaving or you're thinking. We've got a solution for you. It'd be this here little pill. Take those and you'll feel better. And you interfere with one little small amount of brain chemistry in a vastly complex system that we don't understand. It doesn't really work very well. And it might have some side effects which are unpredictable. And I don't think that's the solution to mental health. We've forgotten about the terrain. And so therefore, a more functional health system would be taking into account that we need to build robust humans as part of this. Robust thinking strategies, those are a thing. I'm a real fan of it, as you know, of acceptance commitment therapy. It's easy to learn. It's quite good fun. It helps you with everything from coaching kids soccer and rugby games to getting on better with your partner, to your own mental health, to working with other people that you know that are having more serious mental health problems. It's such a great tool.
And before people go and Google it, what is it?
Acceptance Commitment Therapy, or ACT. And if you do Google it, you'll find heaps of resources, some good little videos, and you can just get started. Yeah. There's no danger. These are psychological tools that are easy to use, and we can easily be literate in them. A good example is the acceptance part of it, accepting that negative thoughts and emotions are normal, and then the commitment part, acting by moving towards your best life and not away from it. I'll give you a good example of how I've used it I was a coach of a kids' soccer football team, under 12s. And I'd go to these games. What would happen is the ref would almost always make a call that was wrong and against us. And then the parents would get upset, the kids would have a meltdown, we would not be our best selves, and everyone would be unhappy and would play worse and act like dicks. So one day we were going to a tournament, and I said to the kids, hey, just before we left school, I was like, oh, kids, hey, what do you reckon? It was a boys' team. Boys, what do you reckon the chances are of the ref making a bad call today? Oh, 100%. It's definitely going to happen. Every game? Yep, definitely going to happen. Is it going to be us against us in every game? Yep, 100%. So we know that we're going to get every game there's a 100% chance the ref will give us a bad call. So how are you going to feel about that? And a couple of kids are like, oh, we'll be all right. I was like, no, are you really? Like, if ref made a bad call against me, I'd be upset. I'm going to feel angry, frustrated. That everyone was like, yeah, we'll be pissed off, not happy. So we're acknowledging that it's 100% certain and we're going to be unhappy. So that's inevitable. That's going to happen. Yep. I was like, well, what are we going to do when that happens? Then some kids are like, well, probably the easiest thing is just going to be to carry on, because otherwise we'll have a meltdown and be useless. And that's all it took. That's acceptance commitment therapy. We're accepting negative thoughts as inevitable things in life, and we're committed to moving towards what we wanted to do in that game, which was just playing. And we won the whole tournament, not because we were the best team, but actually because every other team had meltdowns when the ref did a bad call against them, which was also inevitable. So that's a good example. It applies to mental health and more serious issues as well. We have thoughts. How do we acknowledge that that's the normalcy of some of these things rather than just bottling it up, and discuss it with other people? And then how do we make active decisions to move towards what our best life is? People think
the solution to depression from a medical point of view is the pills or SSRI.
Yeah.
But that's one half of the other half, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think Netflix and American TV have given talk therapy a bit of a bad name. It's like everyone's in therapy. I'm going to see my therapist. And, by and large, that's contextualized as well. I'm talking about how my mother did this, or, has had this childhood experience. And those could be powerful things. But, I prefer the talk therapies that look forward.
Yeah.
Acknowledge where you are and look forward. And that's acceptance commitment therapy is a really good talk therapy like that. And it doesn't need to be held just by psychologists. We can all learn this stuff. It's easy to learn. It's good fun, and it helps you. In medicine, we talk about the treatment gap, and it's everywhere, right? Like, we haven't got enough general practitioners or practice nurses at that level. We haven't got enough surgeons, but psychologists and psychiatrists, we're way short, right? So to give the sort of service that we would need for the number of people that we've got about 20% of the psychologists that we need. The trick is that that's interesting, we could somehow decide to train another 5 times as many psychologists, that's going to take so long and so many resources. We're effectively not going to be able to do that. So that's why I'm interested in health coaching, mental health coaching, and peer supporting, that these tools are available to everyone in society, right? And all of us. And so if you want to learn about some of these things, then because of the internet, they're easily accessible. And you can find them out. We don't have to hide from poor mental health, and we don't have to pretend there's no tools. They exist. A health coach is someone, and it could be a friend, can act in that capacity. It could be a relative, or it could be someone who's a professional health coach, but someone who's got some skill in that area. And some of the people do this naturally. So first of all, they ask questions. They shut up and listen. They ask what's going well for you. They ask what your best life would look like. They ask what's not going well. They hold space, so they allow silence for you to talk. They don't try and find an answer. They know that you've got some answers, and they'll work with you to help you find those. But then they'll generally have some skills, maybe the acceptance commitment therapy, maybe some of the things that we really know that work well for poor mental health, like getting outside and being active, getting near water, the sound of water, being out in nature, whether it be tweaks in your diet, because we know things like sugar and that ultra-processed junk and alcohol have profoundly poor effects on poor mental health. I know some tweaks that you might be able to make with your sleep. They can chuck those in as extra little tools with what you're thinking, but they'll meet you where you're at, which is what medicine often doesn't do. Like just think about the futility of going in. You go and see your doctor, they ask you a couple of questions, and then they write you a prescription. The whole idea of that is stupid. It's like you're not engaging with someone. It's like I'm saying, if you take this medicine, you will get better. It's not how you live your best life. There's way more to it than that. So I think doctors can be good health coaches as well, but they would need longer. 5, 10, 15-minute appointment doesn't allow that relationship to develop.
Pacific people, for example, they don't want to go into a short chat. They want to know, who are you? Where are you from? Who's your relatives? And that's how they build their next step, which is, I trust you or I don't trust you. The current system doesn't even acknowledge that.
No, and Pacific people are particularly good at that, which is a real strength of being Pacific. Frankly, we should be all following that. That's what's completely broken about the medical system, and that's why it particularly excludes Pacific people.
There's a reason that people are, let's just call it, having negative mental health.
Yeah.
I think one of the things we still need to remind people is that it's actually okay that you do. There's partly a system that's not designed for you, and partly because we do have unique challenges like COVID and an alcohol shop on the end of every street. And technically, I saw an article that it could be that fast food is cheaper than going to the supermarket now.
Oh yeah, I saw that. The Domino's pizza's $4 and
that's
it'll cost you $10 to make it.
You're probably not going to buy a house. So they all lead towards chronic stress, don't they?
Yeah.
What the hell do we do?
Like, I think first of all, we underinvest in mental health. So we spend about $2 billion a year on that of our $20-something billion health budget. But if it's about 7 or 8%. But if we got close to 10% of our health budget, we would have an extra $1 billion a year, maybe. Just extra money doing the same thing's probably not going to do much. What would I invest that in? In the next 3 years, I'd invest $1 billion a year for 3 years, and I'd do it equally in the prevention is cure things. We spend next to no money on helping people be healthy to start with and match more of what their normal biology is to where we live. And so healthy eating, exercising better, sleeping better, thinking tools. The prevention is cure is just not even a thing. So for us to be healthy, we have to spend in that. And as you say, if you're Pacific, we need to be investing more in that community than anywhere else. The second thing is workforce development. So we can all learn these tools, but we're going to have a health system that's health-centric, not sickness-centric. And that's going to take some time, but we should invest in that. And the last thing I'm quite passionate about, having had to do this myself, if anyone out there's had to ring the mental health crisis line, then you might have been shocked at what you heard. I don't know everyone gets the same message I got. But I called them and I said, I've got a young person, needs urgent help. They're suicidal. And they said, oh, they're trying to kill themselves right now. I was like, well, what do you mean right now? Like, well, at this instant, are they in the act of suicide? And I was like, oh, no, like, I wouldn't be ringing you if that was the case. I'd be like physically down there doing something about that, but I'm worried that they would. And they're like, oh, well, have you asked them how they're feeling? Flabbergasted. It's like, oh, I hadn't thought of that, mate. Like, really? So that was almost the end of the conversation. I thought it was useless. And they're like, oh, hey, look, if it gets any worse, you can always call the police. And you're like, okay, I'm going to call the police on your son, your daughter, your mum, your grandma, your neighbour, your cousin because of their mental health. Really? Like, is that the best we've got as a society? That, to me, that's inhumane. Any caring society wouldn't have no resources in their community, and we can do so much better. And there are models of that. Like there's a cool thing in the Taranaki called the Taranaki Retreat, and it's just people have set up a farm. You've got a serious mental health things like, what do we think about that? Like you're having a breakdown might be a normal word of having that, but you're just not coping. You might be suicidal or having those thoughts. You might even be getting to an attempt. You can go there and they can give you relief of people who you can identify with that can help you. Why is that not everywhere? Why is the government not sponsoring that? Why do we have to just volunteer to have these things? That is something that I feel really deeply about, but it's not the only answer. Just having better crisis management or better counselling isn't going to fix the situation. Imagine we had a kids' primary school and we sent them out once a week to do this little run for PE or something. It's probably bad PE pedagogy or something, but whatever. And they do it in bare feet. And every week we do it, kids come back with cut feet, blood, cuts. And, what would you do? What would be the solution there? You go, oh, we need more doctors and nurses at the end of this and first aid to fix up their cut feet. Or would you go, oh, actually, there's glass halfway around lying on the road. Let's go and clear that up. Oh, actually, there's a series of rocks that are pretty sharp. Worcester will avoid that. But and actually, some of these kids never go on bare feet because they're just wearing shoes the whole time. We'll actually give them bare feet some of the other time just to toughen their feet up. You'd probably do all three of those. But you certainly wouldn't think of the solution as doing that. Or you took your dog out for a walk, keep coming back with cut feet. We need more vets in this community to fix my dog up. People don't think like that because it's not a sensible solution. But that's what we think in mental health. We need more counselling to fix the mental health problems. It's not, they weren't caused by a lack of counselling. They were caused by other factors, and let's understand what those factors are and deal with them. Preventative medicine, which includes mental health, is not a topic for governments. They're more interested in ram raiding, or something like that, because that attracts votes. And or the fact that you turn up at the emergency department, it takes 4 hours to be seen. Those are different issues, and they need to be addressed as well. But these aren't discussions. So if you're out there, you're in a democracy, raise your hand and talk about this. Like, we're not going to sort mental health out by having more people to talk to. I mean, it's going to help, but it's not the cause or the solution.
It's quite a bleak picture, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. We're in a bad space, and we need to do better. And as a society, we don't actually know how and where to go to. But, those are, I think people need to separate from, there's public health issues, right, which is the whole population. That's what I do, so I've ended up talking about that. But at an individual level, there's lots you can do, right? And you can do it with your family. So you can help make yourself a bit more psychologically literate, and the acceptance commitment stuff is just gold for that. That negative thoughts are normal. Moving towards your best life is completely possible. You're not after happiness. You're after well-being, which is more good mood than bad mood. So you're not going to not have bad moods or dark moods. That's totally what you're going to get. At an individual level, you can get outside in nature. You can eat better. You can sleep better. You can get offline more. I suppose that's the opposite of being online. And your life will be better.
Can you do all those things if you're in chronic stress? Can you do all those?
No, it's really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need to have a more equal society. And again, that's getting to the big picture. But even if you're not in the equal part of the equal society, you're not doing so well. I still think, and this is actually good even for rich people, that your well-being depends on a sort of fraction. The top of the fraction is what you have, and at the bottom of the fraction is what you want. And if you haven't got much and your wants are really high, then your well-being is going to be pretty low. If you've have a lot and you don't want much, your well-being is going to be really high. Now, there's a few different ways of thinking about this, right? If you're really rich, the problem is even if you have a lot, people want more and more and more. So those people get unhappy because their wants are out of control. And if you're at the bottom of society, you haven't got that much and you want a bit more and your well-being's low. So, as a society, we can stop looking at Instagram thinking that we want all this stuff. Frankly, we should be concentrating on some of the basics: good housing, safe communities, decent food supply, friends. The good thing about science is that actually you can measure these quite carefully, right? And so, let's just think about, say, depression. You might be given a SSRI, an antidepressant. So it's not like they don't work. So it's how much they work is not very big. When you give someone an antidepressant above the control group, they get about a 1.8 change in a 40-point depression scale. So it's not no change, but it's just not very big. So you're doing something. So you think about, can you do other things and how big is the effect there? So how much bigger effect does that have on filling the hole? Well, if you get outside and start moving around in nature regularly, being more active, you might think, well, that's not really going to do much. Actually, it does about 5 points on the 40-point scale. So it's getting effective. So, okay, well, what about something else? So I'm going to actually had real trouble sleeping, and I think that's part of the problem. So I'm going to get these little, they're called sleep hygiene. It's nothing to do with being clean. It's about little things that they all add up, right? So your bedroom's dark and cool. You go to bed at a similar time. You don't have coffee in the afternoon if that's a sensitivity. Alcohol screws your sleep up, so especially if you have it just near bedtime. You try and keep your bedroom cool and free of noise, or you put some earplugs in if that's an issue with noisy neighbours and dogs and that. That's about a 6-point change on the depression scale. Well, what about if I improve my diet? I'm just eating crappy food, a lot of sugar, a lot of Monster energy drinks and that sort of thing. 5-point change. What happens when you add all three of those things together? We're not exactly sure scientifically, but they're all filling up that hole much more. So I don't know if people talk about those things, or lifestyles weren't doing for a walk. Whatever, blah, blah, blah. But, compared to our best available medicines, they're like more than twice as effective each on their own. And together they might be really useful. So that's the first thing to think about, right? There's actual tools that for some reason we sort of know they might work, but we don't necessarily take how big they are seriously enough, right? Well, so I think that's a thing. And then you go, well, what about some of this acceptance commitment stuff? What if I start using some of these tools? Similar effect on something like depression or, low mood. Because now you've got tools to act against that low mood. There's the concept of being fused to a thought or diffusion. And so when you become fused to a thought, it's like, I'm angry. So you are angry. You notice that anger. You're trying to make it go away because you don't want to be angry. But the more you make it go away, the bigger it gets. It's like wrestling with a monster on the other side of a pit with a rope. And the more you pull the rope, it's like a computer game. It gives the monster energy. It grows and grows. So the more you get angry about being angry, the angrier you get. The opposite of that's being diffused. It's like, you're going to get angry. That's a normal human emotion, right? Like, things make us angry. You change your language. You go, well, actually, I'm noticing that I'm angry. So think about some subtle differences between these three sentences. People might not get them, but it's true. I'm angry. I am angry. I'm noticing that I'm angry. Or advanced thinking. Oh, geez, I'm noticing that I'm having a thought that I'm angry. So now you're still having the same angry thought, but you're trying to just not wrestle with it and just sit with it. Of course I'm angry. Someone's just cut me off, put my life in danger, or the ref's just called a penalty, for God's sake. Kids just smashed a window with a football. Of course you're going to be angry. That's normal. But you become diffused from it, not be it? And even something like being hungry is a thing. It's like, oh, I'm so hungry, I'm hungry. You're fused. I'm noticing I'm hungry. Now you're a bit more diffused. I'm noticing that I'm having a thought that I'm hungry. You're completely diffused. And actually people who can do that tend to respond to hunger in different ways. Someone goes and just completely pigs out on the I'm hungry. Someone who notices that they're hungry can deal with it, and when they get organised, and they might have some better food.
Wow,
so that's one good little tool, right?
Yeah, and it's all scientifically verified. I mean, in some ways, talking about quite an indigenous approach, nature, all of the things we framed up at the beginning to say that, those are preventative tools.
The most ridiculous thing about science is it basically starts to prove indigenous philosophy to be correct. Why did we chuck that out for so long? Why did we decide to go down this path of just treating symptoms or trying to sort out diseases rather than actually this approach that existed all along? Yeah, you did right. We've totally forgotten that, and that's the great irony of all this.
I guess the key is return to some of those principles.
Yeah.
And we're going to need help. We're going to need some, lobbying, some strong supporters, some champions to make that return to some of these fundamental approaches possible, right? Can you talk a little bit about Pre-Cure and this preventative movement that you're leading?
Well, I've just tried to think about what the future of medicine would look like. And to me, the future of medicine is I call it health-centric, but it's basically bringing, I suppose you've talked about it, indigenous principles. Every indigenous culture, it's Maori in New Zealand, it's Pacific, or whichever Pacific area you're in the Pacific, if it was anywhere around the world, then that knowledge, that tacit knowledge, that inbuilt knowledge around what kept the society healthy is pretty much similar. It's about people, it's about the power of food, it's about the power of nature, it's about the power of connection, it's normalising the fact that we don't do well all the time. The health system is going to have that. So I've been trying to think about that. And then the prevention is cure part of it, and the workforce development. I think we need a new workforce that all of us can be part of, whether formally as a health coach or a mental health coach, and I help you train you in that if that's your calling. But if that's not your calling, then some of these tools are just available to you, and you can help those you love around you with them. So you're a health coach in your family. You're a health coach with your kids. You're a health coach on yourself. I mean, frankly, most of the reason I do this stuff is that I call it me search. I'm just interested in stuff because I want to be healthy. I want to have a good life as well. That's how I got started. It's a bit selfish, but I always get started on that basis.
We've been doing this for 8 years, me and you, sitting down on podcasts. This is the first time I'm being paid to do this. So I want to thank you, mate, for doing that with me over the years.
Yeah.
And being a supporter, you've never said it's going to cost you this much to chat to me. You've always just given your time, and today you invited us to your home. So just on a personal thank you, mate. It's
been a good journey, and hope we keep continuing. You're passionate about getting messages out to everyday people. I'm passionate in doing it. We've got slightly different skill sets, but hopefully this comes together.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, thanks, Grant, and thanks everyone for joining us. And please go back, listen to the bits that are relevant to you. And I look forward to sharing more on this podcast with everyone. If you think you or someone you know may be at immediate risk, call 111 or connect to the following services to get help. Text the Need to Talk Helpline on 1737. Call the Depression Helpline on 0800 111 757 or text 4202. If you would like more information on suicide prevention training and education, visit LEVAR on www.leva.co.nz. More support numbers are available in the show's description.